The footsteps behind me matched my pace perfectly as I ran through the empty park at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, maintaining the exact same rhythm and distance no matter how I varied my speed or changed direction along the winding trails that cut through the darkness between the scattered streetlights. I had been jogging this route for over 6 months as part of my training for a marathon, and I knew every turn, every hill, and every landmark along the 3-mile loop that took me through Riverside Park and back to my apartment building. But tonight was different. Tonight, someone was following me with the deliberate precision of a predator who had been waiting for exactly this opportunity. A lone runner, isolated in the darkness, far from help, and completely vulnerable to whatever intentions drove them to stalk me through the shadows. I could hear their breathing behind me, steady and controlled, suggesting someone who was in excellent physical condition and was not being challenged by the pace I was setting as I tried to outrun them. When I stopped suddenly and turned around, the footsteps stopped too, and I could see nothing but empty trails stretching back into the darkness. But I knew they were there, watching me, waiting for me to resume running so they could continue their pursuit. My name is Sarah, and that night taught me that late-night jogging isn't just about fitness and stress relief. It's about entering a world where predators use the darkness as cover and your predictable routine as an opportunity to hunt where every shadow could hide someone who views your vulnerability as their chance to strike. Ever wondered why some joggers suddenly stop running their favorite routes? Ever questioned why certain runners seem paranoid about being followed during their evening workouts? Share this video if you felt that primal fear when you realized someone was matching your pace in the darkness. Because tonight, I'm sharing 3 true accounts that will make you question every late-night run you've ever taken. These aren't exaggerated stories or urban legends designed to scare people away from nighttime fitness routines. These are real experiences from real runners who learned that when you jog alone after dark, you become a target for people whose intentions are criminal and whose methods are designed to exploit the vulnerability and isolation that come with solo nighttime exercise. Michael was a software engineer in his early 30s who had been maintaining a strict evening running schedule for over 2 years as part of his fitness routine and stress management program, typically beginning his runs around 10 o'clock at night when the summer heat had subsided and the busy streets of his Phoenix neighborhood had quieted down enough to provide peaceful conditions for focused exercise. Michael's running route was a carefully planned 5-mile loop that took him through well-lit residential neighborhoods, past 24-hour businesses, and along main streets where there was usually some traffic and activity even during late evening hours. Michael had chosen his nighttime running schedule specifically to avoid the extreme heat of Arizona summers and the crowded conditions on popular running trails during peak hours. Michael's running routine was methodical and consistent, with the same route, timing, and pace that allowed him to track his fitness progress and maintain the disciplined training schedule that was essential for his physical and mental health. Michael carried a small flashlight, wore reflective clothing, and followed basic safety protocols for nighttime running, including staying on well-lit streets and avoiding isolated areas. For over 2 years, Michael's nighttime running routine had been completely safe and uneventful, with no incidents or concerns that would suggest any problems with his chosen route, timing, or safety precautions. Michael had established friendly relationships with late-night workers at 24-hour businesses along his route, and he was familiar with the normal patterns of traffic and activity in his neighborhood. But during the 3rd week of July, Michael began to notice that he was being followed during his runs by someone who was maintaining surveillance of his activities and seemed to be studying his route, timing, and running habits with the systematic attention of someone who was planning some kind of intervention or attack. The surveillance began subtly, with Michael occasionally noticing the same person or vehicle in different locations along his running route. Michael's stalker appeared to be a man in his 40s who would position himself at various points along Michael's running route, sometimes on foot and sometimes in a dark-colored sedan, always maintaining visual contact with Michael's progress, but staying far enough away to avoid direct confrontation or obvious detection. The stalker's behavior suggested detailed knowledge of Michael's running schedule and route. The stalking behavior escalated when the man began to approach Michael more directly, initially making casual contact at convenience stores and gas stations, where Michael would stop for water or sports drinks during his runs. The stalker would engage Michael in seemingly friendly conversation about running, fitness, and local routes, but his questions were too specific and personal, focusing on Michael's living situation, work schedule, and whether he lived alone. Comment below if you've ever had a stranger ask too many personal questions during your workout stops. Because what Michael discovered about this stalker's intelligence gathering proved that some predators use friendly conversation to assess your vulnerability and plan their attacks when you're most isolated and defenseless. Michael realized that the stalker's friendly conversations were actually intelligence-gathering sessions designed to assess Michael's vulnerability and to determine the best opportunities for attacking him without interference from family members, roommates, or other people who might notice if Michael failed to return from one of his nighttime runs. The stalker's knowledge of Michael's personal life and his obvious interest in Michael's isolation made it clear that his intentions were criminal. The situation became more threatening when the stalker began to follow Michael more aggressively during his runs, sometimes on foot and sometimes in his vehicle, maintaining closer proximity and making it obvious that Michael was being pursued rather than simply observed. The stalker would match Michael's pace when following on foot, and he would drive slowly alongside Michael when using his vehicle. Michael's attempts to vary his route and timing to avoid the stalker were unsuccessful, as the man seemed to anticipate Michael's changes and was able to locate him regardless of when or where he chose to run. The stalker's ability to find Michael, despite his evasive efforts, suggested that he was conducting comprehensive surveillance of Michael's apartment building and was monitoring his activities beyond just the running route. The situation reached a crisis point when the stalker began to leave threatening messages and items at locations along Michael's running route, including notes that contained personal information about Michael's life and threats that made it clear the stalker was planning to escalate from surveillance and intimidation to direct physical attack. The messages indicated that the stalker had detailed knowledge of Michael's apartment, his work location, and his daily routines. Michael realized that he was dealing with a sophisticated stalker who was using his predictable running routine as an opportunity to study and plan an attack that could involve robbery, assault, or worse. The stalker's persistence and escalating behavior suggested that he was experienced with targeting lone runners and had developed methods for isolating and attacking victims. Michael's escape from the stalking situation required him to work with local law enforcement to document the threats and surveillance activities and to implement security measures that would protect him from the stalker's planned attack. The investigation revealed that Michael's stalker had been targeting multiple lone runners in the Phoenix area, using their predictable routes and schedules to plan attacks that had resulted in several robberies and assaults. The stalker was eventually arrested and charged with multiple counts of stalking, harassment, and assault related to his targeting of nighttime runners throughout the metropolitan area. Michael's detailed documentation of the stalking behavior and his cooperation with the investigation were essential for identifying and prosecuting the criminal. Michael's experience taught him that nighttime runners were particularly vulnerable to stalking and attack because of their predictable routines, their isolation during exercise, and their focus on fitness activities that made them less aware of potential threats in their environment. But if you think individual stalkers represent the most dangerous threat that late-night joggers can face, wait until you hear what happened to Jennifer at the lakefront trails. Because sometimes the most terrifying running experiences involve criminal groups who view recreational areas as their territory, and lone joggers as unwelcome witnesses who need to be intimidated, controlled, or eliminated to protect their illegal operations. Jennifer was a graduate student in her mid-20s who had been using late-night jogging as a way to manage the stress and anxiety of her doctoral program in psychology, typically running along the lakefront trail system in her college town around midnight when the paths were empty and she could enjoy the peaceful solitude that helped her process the demanding academic work. The lakefront trail system where Jennifer ran was a well-maintained network of paved paths that extended for over 10 miles along the shoreline, with adequate lighting emergency call boxes and regular security patrols that were supposed to ensure the safety of recreational users during both day and night hours. Jennifer had been using the trail system for over a year without any safety incidents or concerns. Jennifer's running schedule was flexible and varied depending on her academic workload and research deadlines. But she typically ran 3 to 4 times per week during late evening or early morning hours, when the trails were least crowded and she could maintain the focused meditative pace that was essential for her stress relief and mental health maintenance. For over a year, Jennifer's nighttime running routine had been safe and beneficial, with no problems or concerns that would suggest any issues with her chosen location, timing, or safety precautions. Jennifer had occasionally encountered other late-night exercisers, dog walkers, and security personnel during her runs, and she was familiar with the normal patterns of activity along the lakefront trails. But during the second week of October, Jennifer began to encounter a group of people who were using the lakefront trail system for activities that had nothing to do with recreation or exercise, and who seemed to view Jennifer's presence on the trails as an intrusion into their territory and activities. The group consisted of 4 to 6 individuals who would gather at various locations along the trail system during late-night hours. The criminal group's initial interactions with Jennifer were subtle and indirect, with members of the group positioning themselves at locations where they could observe her running activities and assess her as a potential target for robbery or other criminal activity. The group would make comments about Jennifer's appearance, her equipment, and her apparent vulnerability as a lone woman exercising during hours when help was far away. Subscribe and turn on notifications if you've ever felt like a criminal group was treating your running route as their territory, because what Jennifer discovered about their coordination proved that some criminals use recreational areas as bases for illegal operations and view legitimate users as threats to be controlled or eliminated. Jennifer's attempts to avoid the criminal group by varying her route and timing were partially successful. But the group's familiarity with the trail system and their presence at multiple locations made it difficult for Jennifer to use the lakefront paths without encountering them or their criminal activities. The group seemed to view the trail system as their territory and Jennifer's presence as an unwelcome intrusion. The situation escalated when members of the criminal group began to follow Jennifer during her runs, initially maintaining distance, but gradually becoming more aggressive and threatening in their pursuit and harassment. The group would use bicycles and other equipment to pursue Jennifer along the trails, making threatening comments and gestures that were designed to intimidate her. Jennifer realized that the criminal group was trying to establish control over the trail system and eliminate legitimate users who might witness or report their illegal activities to law enforcement or trail management authorities. Jennifer's regular presence on the trails and her potential to observe and report criminal activity made her a target for intimidation and harassment. The situation became more dangerous when the criminal group began to coordinate their harassment activities, with multiple members positioning themselves at different locations along Jennifer's route to create situations where she would be surrounded and unable to escape if they decided to escalate from intimidation to direct physical attack. The group's coordination and tactical positioning suggested experience with controlling territory. Jennifer's fear intensified when she discovered that the criminal group had been gathering information about her personal life, including her apartment location, her academic schedule, and her daily routines beyond just her nighttime running activities. The group's surveillance of Jennifer's life outside of the trail system suggested that they were planning harassment and intimidation activities that would extend beyond just discouraging her from using the lakefront paths. The situation reached a crisis point when Jennifer was surrounded by members of the criminal group during one of her nighttime runs, with the group making explicit threats about what would happen to her if she continued to use the trail system or if she reported their activities to law enforcement or university authorities. The group's threats were specific and credible. Jennifer's escape from the immediate threat required her to use her pepper spray and emergency whistle to create enough distraction and noise to break free from the group's encirclement and reach a location where she could call for help from law enforcement and campus security. Jennifer's quick thinking and defensive actions prevented what could have been a serious assault or kidnapping. Jennifer immediately reported the incident to local law enforcement, campus security, and trail management authorities, providing detailed information about the criminal group's activities and their threats against trail users. The investigation revealed that the group had been operating along the lakefront trail system for several months, targeting lone exercisers and recreational users for robbery and assault. The criminal group was eventually disrupted through increased law enforcement patrols and surveillance of the trail system. But Jennifer's experience had permanently changed her relationship with nighttime running and her sense of safety during solo exercise activities. But even territorial criminal groups seem manageable compared to what happened to David in an industrial area near his hospital. Because sometimes the most dangerous late-night running encounters involve stumbling into sophisticated criminal operations where your professional background makes you not just a witness, but a specific threat that needs to be eliminated to protect illegal activities worth millions of dollars. David was a paramedic in his late 20s who worked 12-hour overnight shifts at a busy urban hospital and used early morning jogging as a way to decompress and transition from his high-stress work environment to his normal daily life and sleep schedule. David's running routine typically began around 6 in the morning after his overnight shift ended, taking advantage of the quiet pre-dawn hours when traffic was minimal. David's running route was a 4-mile loop through an industrial area near the hospital where he worked, chosen specifically because the wide, well-maintained streets provided safe running conditions, and the early morning timing meant that he rarely encountered other people or traffic that might interfere with his focused exercise routine. The industrial area was well lit and had good visibility. David's medical training and experience as a paramedic had made him particularly aware of personal safety considerations and emergency response procedures, and he carried communication equipment and medical supplies that would allow him to handle emergencies or call for help if he encountered problems during his running routine. David's professional background and physical fitness made him confident in his ability to handle most situations. For over 18 months, David's early morning running routine had been safe and effective for managing the stress and physical demands of his paramedic work with no incidents or concerns that would suggest any problems with his chosen route timing or safety precautions. David had occasionally encountered early shift workers, delivery drivers, and security personnel during his runs. But during the first week of December, David began to notice unusual activities in the industrial area that suggested criminal operations were using the early morning hours and the relative isolation of the area to conduct illegal activities that took advantage of the limited witness presence and law enforcement attention during the time period when David was running. David's medical and emergency response training made him particularly observant of unusual activities and potential safety threats, and he quickly recognized that the criminal operations in the industrial area posed significant risks to anyone who might witness or interfere with their illegal activities. David began to vary his route and timing to avoid areas where he had observed suspicious activities. The situation became more concerning when David realized that the criminal operations were being conducted by people who were armed and prepared to use violence to protect their illegal activities from interference by witnesses or law enforcement. David observed weapons, coordinated activities, and security measures that suggested the criminal organization was sophisticated and dangerous. Hit that like button if you work in emergency services and have ever realized your professional training makes you a more dangerous witness to criminal activity, because what David discovered about this organization's response to his presence proved that some criminals view paramedics and other first responders as specific threats that require elimination rather than just intimidation. David's attempts to report the criminal activities to law enforcement were complicated by the fact that his observations were made during his personal exercise time, and he was not acting in his professional capacity as a paramedic or emergency responder. David's reports to police were taken seriously because of his professional background and credibility, but the criminal organization seemed to be aware of law enforcement interest. The situation escalated when members of the criminal organization became aware of David's presence in the area and began to view him as a potential threat to their operations because of his professional background and his obvious observation of their activities. The criminals began to monitor David's running routine and to gather information about his work schedule and personal life. David realized that his professional background as a paramedic made him a particularly dangerous witness to criminal activities because of his training in observation, documentation, and emergency response procedures that could be used to assist law enforcement investigations and prosecutions. The criminal organization's awareness of David's professional capabilities and their obvious concern about his potential to threaten their operations created a dangerous situation. The situation became more dangerous when David was approached directly by members of the criminal organization who made it clear that they were aware of his identity, his work location, and his daily routines, and who warned him that his continued presence in the industrial area during their operational hours would not be tolerated. The criminals' threats were specific and credible. David's response to the threats required him to work with law enforcement agencies and his hospital's security department to implement protection measures and to provide intelligence that could be used to investigate and prosecute the criminal organization. David's professional knowledge and his detailed observations of the criminal activities were valuable for law enforcement efforts. The investigation that followed David's reports led to a major law enforcement operation that resulted in multiple arrests and the seizure of significant quantities of stolen vehicles, drugs, and weapons that had been part of the criminal organization's operations in the industrial area. David's cooperation with the investigation was essential for the success of the law enforcement operation. David's experience taught him that early morning runners could inadvertently become witnesses to criminal activities that put them at risk of violence. The incident also highlighted the importance of reporting suspicious activities to law enforcement. These three accounts from late-night joggers across America reveal a disturbing truth about solo nighttime exercise. Running alone in the darkness can expose you to predators and criminals who use the cover of night and the isolation of running routes to hunt for victims who are focused on their fitness and unaware of the dangers lurking in the shadows around them. Michael's experience with a systematic stalker in Phoenix proved that some predators use friendly conversation and intelligence gathering to study lone runners and plan sophisticated attacks that exploit their predictable routines and isolation. Jennifer's encounter with a territorial criminal group at the lakefront trails demonstrated that some criminals view recreational areas as their territory and lone joggers as unwelcome witnesses who need to be intimidated or eliminated. David's discovery of dangerous criminal operations in an industrial area revealed that some late-night runners can inadvertently become witnesses to sophisticated illegal activities where their professional backgrounds make them specific threats that criminal organizations will go to great lengths to eliminate. The most chilling aspect of these accounts isn't just the individual dangers themselves, it's the realization that nighttime runners enter a world where the normal rules of safety and security do not apply, and where their focus on fitness and stress relief can make them oblivious to the predators who are watching from the darkness, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. Michael had no warning that his consistent running routine would attract the attention of a sophisticated stalker who viewed his predictable schedule as an opportunity to plan and execute a violent attack. Jennifer had no indication that her stress relief running would expose her to a territorial criminal group who viewed her presence as a threat to their illegal operations. David had no clue that his early morning exercise routine would make him a witness to criminal activities where his professional background as a paramedic made him a specific threat that needed to be eliminated rather than just intimidated. If you're currently running alone during late night or early morning hours, if you've noticed suspicious behavior or felt like you were being followed during your workouts, or if you've encountered people who seemed too interested in your running schedule and personal information, trust your instincts and remember that no fitness goal is worth risking your safety. Ring that notification bell. If these stories have made you reconsider your nighttime running habits and remember that the benefits of nighttime exercise might not be worth the risks of exposing yourself to predators who use the darkness and isolation as cover for criminal activities that target lone runners. The next time you consider a late-night jog, remember these stories and carefully evaluate whether alternative exercise options might be safer than running alone in areas where help is far away and predators use the cover of darkness to hunt for victims who are focused on their fitness goals and unaware of the dangers surrounding them. Before you go, check out the playlist in the description for more true late-night exercise horror stories that could save your life, because in the end, the most important part of staying fit is staying alive, and no training schedule is worth risking your safety in situations where you're alone, vulnerable, and far from help. Comment below if these stories have changed how you think about solo nighttime exercise, and remember that sometimes the most dangerous part of staying fit is not the physical demands of exercise. It's the moment when you realize that someone has been watching you from the shadows, studying your routine, and planning the perfect opportunity to turn your healthy lifestyle choice into a nightmare. Stay safe out there, and remember that the best workout is one that gets you home safely, even if it means finding alternative exercise options or changing your routine to avoid the hidden dangers that lurk in the darkness beyond the streetlights, waiting for runners who trust that their familiar routes will remain safe places for the pursuit of health and fitness.